As I'm recording this, I'm still in shock about what happened. Even as I'm telling you this, I can't even believe the words that are coming out my mouth. My name is Rick, and to give you a little background about my character, I'm a bit of a womanizer. Now, the reason why I'm telling you this because it does play a factor into the story I'm about to tell you. And it led me to be questioned by the cops. It all makes sense after I get done explaining. It happened 2 years ago. I lost my job working at Home Depot, and I needed a job really fast. One night, I was at a bar that was also a nightclub. As I was sitting at the bar drinking, I was talking with the owner, and that's when he offered me a position as a security guard. That's when he offered me a job, being a security guard, walking around the parking lot, making sure everything and everyone was safe. I accepted him on the offer because the pay was good. He was going to pay me about $18 an hour. A couple of days later, I was already on the job, securing the parking lot of this bar/nightclub. I liked the job. Plus, like I said, I was a bit of a womanizer. Each time a woman came to enter into the nightclub with somewhat revealing clothes, I would always stare at them. Now, some of the women didn't care, and some of them got a little bit creeped out, and I don't blame them. Now, around this time, there was a report of 2 women going missing while I was securing the parking lot area. Eventually, as I stayed there several months on into the New Year Eve celebration, 15 women have gone missing, and for some reason, I was a person of interest. And the reason is because 2 women have reported me to my boss, claiming that I was staring at them, which was true. But they took that as maybe I was the one that was going around doing something to these women, making them disappear or kidnapping them. And that caused the business to go down in sales and attendance, especially among women, because they felt like if I was there, they didn't feel safe. It got so bad to the point my boss had to put me on temporary leave until he investigated. Meanwhile, the cops came at my place and asked me questions about these women that went missing, and I assured to them that I had nothing to do with it. But regardless, I didn't like the reputation I was getting. I was being falsely accused of kidnapping women. Now, like I said, I'm a bit of a womanizer, and I do like to stare at women, especially if they're pretty, but I would never in my life kidnap any woman or harm any woman. But regardless, people made up their minds about me. Eventually, this speculation passed, and my boss told me to come back into work. On that particular day, on my first day back on the job, securing, I made sure not to look at any woman. But I couldn't help but to feel eyes staring at me, especially coming from women as they were approaching the club. I heard one of them even mention that they had pepper spray in case the security guard tried something. Like I said, my name was being dragged through the mud for something I didn't do. As I was sitting there watching the parking lot, there was this older woman that came out of the bar. She happens to be the mother of the owner of this establishment that I was securing the parking lot for. And she told me, "You know, I don't believe in those accusations that are against you. I know you had nothing to do with those women's disappearance. You're a good young man. Obviously someone is setting you up. But don't let it get to you. Obviously this would have never had happened had my dumbass son kept this a place for where older people can come and hang out at. That's what this place used to be. But then my son decided to sell out and try to appeal to the younger people. I can't tell you how disgusted I am how he's running this place. Look at this. Women coming in this place dressed up like prostitutes. It's disgusting. Then I nervously replied back to her, well, thank you for believing me that I had nothing to do with those women's disappearance. It is kind of hard on me, everyone thinking I'm some creep, but I appreciate it. Thank you. After we got done talking, the old lady left, and I finished up my shift securing the parking lot. And after my shift was done, I drove home and I went off to bed. The next morning, I was making my way towards work again when I noticed I saw a ton of police cars and ambulance at my job. There was caution tape around the entrance of the building. I was very confused. Not only that, but I saw a whole bunch of people standing around to see what was going on. I parked my car just a couple of blocks away from the building. I got out of my car and I made my way over there. And when I got over there, I saw something that till this day still shocks me. There was a woman who was murdered, and based off of what I was looking at, it looked like she was stabbed severely multiple times. But that was a shocker. Here comes the shocker. Now, what I'm about to tell you, you're gonna have to brace up. It shocked me, and as you're listening to this, it's gonna shock you. So it turned out all the women that went missing was actually due to the man who owns the place, my boss. Not only that, but it turns out his mother, the woman I was talking to who believed in me, also was playing a part in the women's disappearance as well. Here's what was going on. Apparently, the son and the mother had organized a prostitution ring. Apparently, they were kidnapping these women and making them prostitutes. Not only that, but it turned out her son, my boss, was a mobster. Not only that, but his mother, the woman I regularly talked to, was also putting these women into cult, brainwashing them, and making them have ideas that she has. After I found out about all of that was going on, I couldn't even believe what I heard. It didn't even feel real. First, I was working for a mobster. Second, they had everything to do with those women disappearing, and I took the blame for it. Third of all, I was talking to a woman who was manipulating and controlling women into a cult. This really got to me. Both my boss and his mother were good to me, but I guess it just shows you really don't know people. I also learned that the women were being held captive underground at the bar/club. Apparently, there was a secret basement there where the women would be held captive there. I guess one of the women refused, and apparently they killed her. That was the woman that I saw on the ground. The club eventually got shut down, and I had to look for a job elsewhere. I'm writing this on Reddit because I know that if I post this anywhere else, like on X, Instagram, or TikTok, they're going to delete it. Even if I post this on YouTube, it's going to be flagged as misinformation. But trust me when I tell you, I know what I saw. And I'm writing this down because I want to share it with everyone, even people who don't believe me. You can call me crazy and say I need to go to a mental hospital, that I need to be taken away by the men in white. I don't give a fuck. I'm going to tell you this story I'm going to tell you my experience of what I saw in that mall that day. This happened on New Year's Eve of 2023. I was at the mall shopping, doing a little shopping spree for myself because it was my birthday as well. I was having a good time. The atmosphere at the mall was great. That was until, out of nowhere, I started to hear a bunch of screaming and then followed by running footsteps running in my direction. I was taken aback. I was really confused, wondering what was going on. Why was everyone screaming? My heart began to pump really fast as I saw a whole bunch of people running. But this is what got me shooken up even more. There was a woman who was running past me, and I managed to stop her for a second, but I could tell she looked very annoyed. And I asked her, "Ma'am, what's going on? Is there an active shooter? Someone fill me in, what's happening? Why is everyone running?" The woman replied in a shaky and rushing voice and said, "There's a bunch of 8-foot creatures chasing after us. I need to go. You need to get out of here too if you want to survive." And before I can even reply to the woman, the power went out in the mall as I heard more people running and screaming. It was really becoming really chaotic. I somehow didn't believe this. Being the dumbass that I was, I ran in the opposite direction, facing the crowd. I ran until it got quiet. I went in part of the mall that was the food area. It was really dark, and it felt very intense. The air didn't feel right. I thought for a moment maybe these customers were overreacting, or maybe a lot of them were on drugs or something. I didn't know what to think. I just find it hard to believe that there are 8-foot creatures roaming about in the mall. I got further into the food court, even though it was dark, and I didn't see anyone. It was like a ghost town. See that all the customers who had got up and left their food, their belongings, stuff that they bought at the mall. Everything was left behind. I felt kind of sick to my stomach. Like the sickness of, like, I know something is gonna happen. And it wasn't something good. It felt eerie in this part of the mall. I could still hear a bunch of people screaming, leaving the mall, but the screams and the yells and the footsteps began to dwindle down. Eventually, the mall grew very eerily silent. It was very uncomfortable, and I started to feel this dread in my stomach. Apparently, looking at everything these customers left behind, like valuables and purses, food, tablets and iPads and iPhones. Apparently there was something that must have spooked these people to cause them to run. I decided to turn around and get out of the mall. But when I turned around, oh my God. When I turned around, I saw it. I saw what they were talking about. Standing right in front of me was a creature. No, scratch that. A bunch of creatures that were indeed 8 feet tall. They were black all over. They had sharp teeth, but they had no eyes. I could tell they were drooling, and I can hear them making weird sounds. It didn't even feel real. Chills began to develop all over my body. I couldn't even believe this was happening. I thought I was dreaming. I tried to make a run for it, but one of the creatures grabbed me. And they were trying to eat me. The other creature grabbed my arms, while the other one grabbed my legs. They were getting ready to eat me. I had to do all I can to fight, as they were really getting ready to bite down on me. For some reason, I had enough courage and enough willpower to fight them off. And I ran out of that store so fucking fast. As I was exiting out of the store, I saw a bunch of FBI agents. I had my hands up to let them know that I wasn't a threat. I can hear them yelling at me, telling me to get out of the store. One of the FBI agents guided me out of the store. After that, I ran away from the store. I got out of there so fast, I didn't even look back. I didn't even realize that I wetted on myself until I got back to my apartment. I don't know what the fuck I saw, but I can tell you right now, those were not human beings or any creature that walks among the earth. The next day, after this happened, strangely, the news media never reported on it. But when they did, they came up with this bullshit lie, claiming that hundreds of cops were called because 50 teens were fighting with sticks. But I can assure you, that's not true. They're covering this up. They're trying to keep the truth from you and from me. This story I'm about to tell you is about two female friends who went to New Orleans, Louisiana for the Mardi Gras festivities. During the last 2 years of the Mardi Gras festivities, 155 people had mysteriously disappeared without a trace. It was so odd and strange that not even police officers and top-notch investigators and detectives couldn't even solve. Now, the story I'm about to tell you about these two female friends, their names are Trina and Katie. Both Trina and Katie work for the same company. The job pays very well, but they find themselves working 60 plus hours a week. One day, Trina decided that her and Katie should go on a vacation together. That's when Katie suggested, "Hey Trina, look, we've both been working really hard these last 6 months. We need to go on a vacation. How about me and you put in our vacation time and we go down to New Orleans, Louisiana for the Mardi Gras festivities? What do you say?" Trina replied,
"You know what? I'm in. Let's do it."
After they agreed on what they were going to do, they asked their boss for time off for vacation, and luckily, their boss gave them an entire month for vacation, more than what Katie and Trina expected. So they got their stuff together, and they got their plane tickets, and the following day, they took their plane to New Orleans, Louisiana. When they got there, the Mardi Gras festivities began. While watching the parade, Trina said to Katie,
"Katie, I'm so glad you recommend us going here for vacation. I really needed this. We needed this."
"Well, of course we needed this, but especially you, Trina. You always keep your head into those paperworks non-stop, and you overwork yourself. So yes, both of us deserve this. But you, Trina, most definitely deserve to take a vacation," Katie replied before taking a sip of her margarita. Katie can feel herself getting buzzed and almost drunk. So she decided to call it a day a little earlier. Trina wanted to stay out a little longer. So she let Trina continue to celebrate while Katie stumbled her way back to the motel that her and Trina shared. As she was stumbling her way back into her hotel, she noticed an older man looking at her.
"Oh great, not another fucking creep. I really can't stand men sometimes,"
she said while grabbing onto her pepper spray just in case the man tried something. But as she was walking closer, the man called out to her,
"Hey miss, you might want to be careful walking by yourself, especially at night. There's been reports of people going missing. Over 150 people went missing, especially during the Mardi Gras season. They never been heard from again. Completely vanished. Disappeared."
"Okay, thanks for the warning. Thank you,"
Katie said to the man while brushing him off. She continued to walk, and the man stopped looking at her, and he went on about his business. As Katie continued to walk, she noticed that she saw something very strange. Now at first she thought maybe she was just too buzzed or drunk, but when she looked at it closer, she noticed a light. It was a really dark red light. It looked bloody colored.
What the fuck am I looking at?
Katie said while trying not to stumble over from being drunk. As Katie walked it closer to this weird thing, she noticed that the air began to feel more colder. Despite the temperatures only being in the mid-70s, it felt more colder, especially as she was inching her way closer to this strange light. She can feel the air getting thicker around her. She felt like there were eyes watching her everywhere. Katie got closer and closer until she realized it looked like another dimension. It was like some portal. Katie was about to put her hands in when she noticed a hand grabbed her arm out of the portal. It was a creature like hands. It wasn't human. The hands were black all over, and it had long nails. Katie let out a quick scream before she was taken inside of that portal, and that portal closed. A couple of hours later, a drunken Trina decided to go back to her hotel, expecting Katie to be there. But when she got to the hotel, she noticed that she didn't see Katie anywhere. It had her a little bit concerned because she knew that Katie was a little bit drunk and she wanted to get back to the hotel to sleep it off. She got a little bit concerned, so she called Katie, but Katie didn't reply. She ringed her again, but no response. Trina decided to sober up real quick by drinking her some coffee and then go back out into the town of New Orleans to look for her friend. She couldn't find her anywhere. She kept on calling, but didn't get a response. As she headed towards an alley, she noticed that she saw Katie's phone on the ground. Knots began to form in Trina's stomach to the point she almost was about to throw up. She grabbed her phone while shaking her hands and tried to call 911 while calling out for Katie, but she still didn't get no response. As she was about to get someone on the operating line, that's when she saw a portal appear. It was the same bloody red color that shined it really bright. Trina dropped her phone and she noticed something was coming out of that portal. She stood back, walking backwards, but as she was walking backwards, she noticed two inhuman hands coming out of the portal. Black hands with long fingernails and long fingers. And then a head popped out. The minute Trina saw that head, she screamed. It looked like a demonic humanoid creature. It had black eyes and two holes where its nose should be. When it opened up its mouth, it had razor sharp teeth. It got out of the portal, and this demonic creature stood 12 feet tall. Trina was about to make a run for it, but the demon leaped and grabbed at Trina. Immediately, Trina tried to fight it off, but the demon was too strong. The demon managed to knock Trina out and drag her body into the portal. After that, the portal closed. and no one has seen from Katie or Trina since then. Their families filed a missing persons report, but no officer or detectives could find any trace of them. The only thing that was left to indicate they disappeared were their phones. There's an old lady named Barbara, and she loves taking care of the kids in our neighborhood, especially mine. My son Jackson loves Barbara. She's a nice older lady. She's in her 70s, and unfortunately she lost her child 20 years ago due to a drunk driver. So to help her to cope, she always helps to take care of all the kids in the neighborhood. She even turned her house into a daycare, but it didn't last long because each time the kids would go spend a day at Barbara's house, they will always wind up going missing. People first suspected Barbara had something to do with it, but I did all I could to prove them wrong. She was so good to my son. There was no way that this kind, elderly woman would harm children. But boy, was I wrong. One night, my son, who was the only kid spending time at Barbara's house, while the other parents in the neighborhood didn't trust Barbara, I was the only one that still had faith in her. But anyway, I had an emergency and I had to go somewhere. So I let my son stay over at Barbara's place while I go take care of that emergency. 5 hours later, I come back to the house and I walk a couple of blocks to her neighborhood. I knock on the door, but there was no response. I knocked again, but still no response. I noticed that her door was cracked open. I opened the door slowly, and the atmosphere there, inside of her house, felt off. It felt sinister. The air around me felt cold. It felt like the cold air was choking me. As I made my way around the house, I noticed there was a rotten meat smell. I walked it closer to the smell, and it got more stronger as I walked it into her room. I had to cover my nose because I could feel the bowels coming up through my stomach. When I got into Barbara's room, I saw something so terrifying, but I had to act quickly. My son was crying, and there I saw Barbara, but she looked completely different. She looked like a humanoid creature. I just don't know how to explain. Before I can even process what was going on, Barbara grabbed my son, and she opened up her mouth so unnaturally wide, and with one bite, she ate my son. Despite me running over there quickly and stopping her, I was too late. I can hear her munching down on his bones and his flesh. She ate my son, and it's not fair. I was the one that was supposed to eat my son.
That greedy ass bitch.
Have you ever had a feeling in your gut about something that you know is wrong or something that you know is not right, but you ignore it anyway? Well, that's what happened to me. I ignored my gut, and I should have listened to it. My name is Jacob. I'm 22 years old. I'm not a strong guy. Matter of fact, I'm pretty small and skinny. And I would be lying if I told you that I was the most bravest person. This happened when I was 19 years old. I had dropped out of college because I was having a very hard time doing any tasks there. And I felt like I really didn't need college. My father was paying for me to go to college. And when I told him that I quit, he got a little bit upset with me. But he told me it was fine. He told me that in order for me to stay with him until I get my own place, I would have to get a job, which that's what I started to do. I was looking around for some jobs until my friend Marquise told me that they're hiring at a 7-Eleven. But when he told me the location of the 7-Eleven, I almost didn't really want to take the job. See, that area has a high crime rate, and there's been a lot of murders in that area, and a lot of robberies and assault. But I was in need of a job, so when I got there, I met with the manager. Unfortunately, he put me on night shift duty, which I really hate because that's where the worst of the crime happens, at night in that location. But regardless, I took the job offer. When I got there, my shift was going to start from 8 p.m. all the way to 8 a.m., meaning I was going to have a 12-hour shift. On my first day on the job, everything went okay. I finished my shift, and I was okay with the job. It wasn't too many bad people that came into the store, maybe just a couple of drunk homeless people. That was about it. But on the second night of my shift, that's where everything changed. I was stocking all the food, making sure that everything was stocked for customers to come in and get. That's when I heard the door opening, and I saw a large man walking towards the register. I kept my composure, and I ran over there to the register, and I asked the guy, "Hello, sir, can I help you with anything?" The man just stood there for about 5 minutes just staring at me. I can feel this man staring into my soul. Once again, I had that gut feeling. I felt like I had to do something. I felt like I had to run, but I ignored those feelings. I looked at the man again and I asked him, "Can I help you with something, sir? Do you need me to get you some cigarettes or anything?" And for that second, the man did not reply. I was about to ask him another question, but then the guy said something, and what he said next made my skin drained of any color. "This is a robbery. Give me all your fucking money. I don't want to hear anything else. Don't try anything stupid or else I'm gonna kill you." This didn't even feel real, but I did what the guy asked me to do, and I gave him the money. "Well, sir, there you go. There's everything right there. That's all the money in the register. You can go now, please," I nervously said, hoping that the man would go away now that I gave him what he wanted. But to my horror, the man just stood there. And then he gave me one of the most chilling smiles I've ever seen a human being give to a person. Then the man said with his cold voice, "Now, you know I can't do that. You know how I look. And I can't have you giving police any information for them to catch me. I gotta kill you, kid." Sir, even if you do kill me, we have cameras. It's gonna pick up on how you look. So killing me won't do you any good," I nervously replied. But the man said something that made the situation go from bad to worse. He said, "Oh, don't worry. I hacked the cameras. They're turned off. No one's gonna know how I look. The only thing they're gonna find is a dead body. Goodbye, kid." My grandmother told me a very terrifying story, something that she experienced. This happened to my grandfather. She said she witnessed my grandfather being possessed by a demon. It happened when they were leaving their beach house. They saw 3 people wearing long hooded cloaks, and they had a pentagram sign engraved on the sand. As my grandparents were leaving the beach, those people turned towards my grandfather, specifically my grandfather, and they were whispering and chanting something in another language. My grandmother thought that that was weird, that they were only focusing on my grandfather. My grandparents paid it no mind and they left. 2 days later, that's when my grandmother noticed that my grandfather was acting strange. It started off with him mumbling to himself at night. On another occasion, my grandmother would wake up to see my grandfather standing over my grandmother, laughing and giggling. This began to freak her out, but then things got a lot worse. My grandfather one day was running a very high fever, and so my grandmother took him to the hospital because she thought maybe he could have had an infection. But when the doctors did their exam on my grandfather, they didn't find any type of infection. The only thing they did was give my father a prescription to help lower his fever, and it kept him for a day. The following day, my grandfather was discharged. 2 days later, after being discharged from the hospital, my grandmother had to leave to go to work, leaving my grandfather home alone to recover from his fever. When she came back from work the next morning, she was met with a sight that will haunt her forever. She went upstairs to check on my grandfather to make sure that he was all right, but when she got into the room, she noticed that my grandfather's body was levitating, and then his levitating body stood upright, and she noticed that his face changed, and he had green eyes, glowing green eyes, staring at her. And then my grandfather began to speak to my mother, but the thing is, it wasn't his voice. It was a dark, demonic, growling voice. My grandmother didn't know what to do at that moment. Something was going on with her husband. This wasn't him. Something or someone took over him. Immediately, my grandmother closed the door and locked it from the outside. She ran to her neighbor for help, and luckily her neighbor knew a priest. They got the priest to come out to my grandmother's house, and the priest immediately went upstairs into my grandparents' room, and that's where the priest done an exorcist. It took about 5 hours, but luckily it was a success. The priest was able to drive out the demon inside that was possessing my grandfather. After the priest was done exorcising the demon out of my grandfather, he sat down for a while and talked it to my mother, and he asked did she notice anything strange in the last couple of weeks. And that's when her mind went back to those people dressed in cloaks. They had a pentagram on the sand. She also mentioned to the priest that those people were solely staring at her husband, my grandfather. The priest believed that those people may have summoned a demon, and that demon latched on to my grandfather, causing him to be possessed. After that, my grandfather was back to normal, and everything was okay. But my grandparents now are more careful about who they are around, and they always made sure to carry protection, especially for my grandfather. My grandmother was relieved because she thought she was going to lose the love of her life forever. But every now and then, my grandmother has nightmares about that day where my grandfather was possessed. This was the most creepiest and terrifying event that my grandmother has ever experienced, and a part of her will never be the same again after witnessing what happened to my grandfather. I don't care if they ask me. My answer will always be no. I'm never staying after hours at JR Elementary School ever again. You're probably wondering what happened. Well, this happened 3 years ago. I was staying after school hours grading papers for my class. I had boiled me some coffee and had a bunch of energy drinks because I knew I was going to be in this classroom past 12 o'clock at midnight. I was grading the paper. It was nice and quiet. Everything was perfect. It was quiet. I felt relaxed grading paper and everything. That wasn't until I looked up and I saw kids in my classroom. But the strangest thing was they were not my students at all. But then it got a little bit more creepier. The temperature in the room suddenly dropped to the point where it felt like I was inside of a freezer. The kids were looking at me. First, their eyes were black, like they had no eye sockets, nothing there. Then their eyes began to glow blue while looking at me. I was freaking out. I decided to make a run for it because I didn't know what was going on, but I felt like I was in danger. I ran all the way to the teacher's lounge and I locked the door. Stood there in the teacher's lounge for about 15 to 20 minutes, trying to wrap my head around the fact of what I just saw. A part of me knew what I saw, but I couldn't be too sure. As I was thinking maybe it was safe for me to get out of the teacher's lounge, I heard several knocks at the door, and then I heard a bunch of kids laughing. They kept asking me to open the door and to come join them. I don't know what they meant by that, but they kept on knocking, and their knocking got more persistent. They kept knocking and knocking and knocking until finally I've had enough. I opened the door and I looked at the kids with their bright blue glowing eyes, and I told them, "You're right, kids. I need to go back home. I don't need to be trying to fight this. I know the truth. We all died 50 years ago. So why am I fighting death? Okay, you know what? I'm ready. Let's go on the other side, my precious students. It's time for me to let go." Like I said, I'm never going back to JR Elementary School again because I never left. My friend Joseph told me something that he experienced, and till this day, he doesn't know if it was real or if it was just a hallucination. See, it goes like this. He left a house party at around 3 o'clock in the morning. This was about 6 months ago. He was very intoxicated, but his house was not far from the party he left. It was only about a 13-minute walk. As he was stumbling his way to his house, he had to cross a wooded area. As he was crossing the woods, he stopped in his tracks because he felt eyes staring at him. But then again, he thought maybe the liquor was making him even more paranoid than normally. So he dusted off that feeling and kept stumbling his way towards his house. Then, about a few minutes later, Joseph heard a weird noise. It sounded like an animal, but it just sounded wrong. The best way he could describe it, it sounded like a person mimicking a cat. It freaked him out a little bit, so he quickly stumbled his way towards the house. He still had about 6 more minutes until he got there. But as he was stumbling his way, he heard that cat meow again, but this time it felt closer. He turned around and he saw what looked like a human being on all four. This person began to crawl, moving slowly towards Joseph. As this person came into the light, Joseph almost pissed his pants. when this person came into the light, it was a human being, but this man who was pretending to be a cat had blood all over him. He was wearing nothing but boxers, but what was even worse was he had no ears. It looked like his ears were cut off. Not only that, Joseph looked at his nose, and he didn't have a human nose. It looked like a cat nose. To explain it, it looked like it was surgically sewed in. Not only that, but the man's eyes. Those eyes is what really done it for Joseph. The man did not have human eyes at all, but he had cat-like eyes. It was almost like someone took a cat's eyeballs and placed it in this man's eye socket. When Joseph saw that shit, he didn't know how, but he sobered the fuck up so fast, and he dipped. He ran all the way until he got into his house. Till that day, Joseph wants to believe that what he saw was a hallucination because of all the drinking that he did. But then again, he said that felt too real to be a hallucination.